Hello and welcome to the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck. Tonight, we have a very special guest to talk about the evils of what she calls the green gospel. Sheila Zilinsky, a former high-level government executive for the Ministry of Environment, discovered confidential information in 2007 that led her to speak out against the fraud of anthropogenic global warming and the entire green agenda. She is an internationally recognized radio host, author, and minister. Her radio broadcast ministry outreach extends to the four corners of the globe. Sheila examines the emergence of the New World Order, global governance, Agenda 21, the Green Agenda, Big Brother, Marxism, the coming one world Antichrist system, transhumanism, and the rise of the false doctrine, and apostasy in the church. She examines news and world events under the lens of a biblical worldview and end times Bible prophecy. You can check her out on her show Weekend Vigilante, which just recently she was kind enough to invite me on. So all that being said, I'd like to welcome Sheila Zilinsky to the show. Sheila, how are you doing?
Great, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm really glad to have you on. The last time we talked was on your show. It was an absolute blast, and like we were saying before the show, I don't think we're going to have any shortage of things to talk about, so I'm sure this will be the first of many the Sharpening Report episodes.
Absolutely, and I look forward to many more discussions.
Absolutely, me too. All right, so for those who might not be familiar with you, can you give us a little information on yourself?
Absolutely. Well, as you said, again, I have a talk show. Obviously, I was a former government top advisor, as you alluded to earlier. So one of the things I did, I was really fairly high up in government. And so it would be the equivalent of kind of a deputy minister position, really high level government executive in line for the deputy minister. And so in 2007, I met sort of a band of chicanerous thugs. David Suzuki was one of those people, and that was back in 2007. And I started to know there was something very insidious about this whole green agenda. I mean, this is stuff we never heard about this 10 years ago, Josh. And then suddenly, barely a day goes by when we're not inundated with this green agenda, global warming, climate change, climate disruption. It's just stunning how this has really eviscerated all our rights as well. I mean, implementing carbon taxes, other chicanerous kinds of executive orders that Obama has implemented. The list goes on. And it's really incredible because these guys have, hijacked the very air we breathe under the very seemingly benevolent guise of the greater good, the moral imperative. We're just, it's a noble effort. It's a noble effort to protect the environment, right? Wink, wink. So this is what we're dealing with. So again, I, as a top level climate advisor, I started to know that there were some serious issues. And of course, that really made me speak out against anthropogenic global warming and really the entire green agenda. So when I say anthropogenic global warming, that's just a fancy word for man-made. They believe that man is causing global warming, and I virulently disagree.
Fantastic. Yeah, and this is what really intrigued me about this, because you never hear the other side. The world is so inundated with all this stuff, but you never hear that there is another side to it. And reading through your book, I mean, you blew my mind. You absolutely blew my mind. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on. Now your book, it's called Green Gospel: The New World Religion. And like we just briefly mentioned, the world tends to look at the Green Initiative as a good thing. We're helping out the environment, living cleaner, all that sort of stuff. And coming against something like that so many people, believe in and hold dear, I mean, that must have been a hard decision. But, upon reading your book, I'm glad that that's a decision that you've made. What was it initially that made you want to write a book like this?
Well, the problem was that I saw is no one was really getting to the heart of what's really going on under this very malevolent green agenda. We hear it all the time: eco-friendly, sustainability. We hear these terms every single day we're inundated by all this rhetoric, and yet nobody was getting into the real pagan occultic piece around this and what this is really about. Nobody was getting at the very heart of today's green movement. So that's what I wanted to really cover, because Josh, there was no one really connecting all these green dots, if you will. So I wanted to cover that, and that's what really spurred me. And I thought, well, I don't really want to take on the Pope and, every single globalist in this very chicanerous, very malevolent, these megalomaniacs that are involved in all this. I mean, who wants to, put a target on their back? But no one else was covering it. So it really compelled me to get this information out there.
Well, I'm so glad that you did, and you do it in an easy to understand way, in a way that I believe anybody can relate to. Because for myself, I don't, I don't want to say that I don't have an interest in politics, but it's not a strong suit of mine, like political things or social things like this. But even for somebody like me, I mean, I was able to relate to your book. I was able to understand what you were saying, and I was, it left me wanting to do something, or wanting to. It gave me a belief in something that I didn't even know really was an issue. But I'm glad that you brought this to to the surface. In your book, you explain the analogy of watermelons with this agenda. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So watermelon, the fruit, is green on the outside, but it's red in the inside. So I just wanted to sort of use a physical depiction, the aesthetics of saying, okay, listen, this looks green, but it's really not even about the environment. It's not about saving the planet. It's really a very Marxist ideology. And that's where that term came from, because in my book, I call it watermelons, green on the outside, red on the inside. So this is what this is. It's a very Marxist, but it's also very devilish. It's really the grandest fraud of our era, Josh. And so a lot of people just go, oh, global warming, and they kind of shrug it off. But this is very, very insidious. It's very nefarious. And that's what people are not really making the connection. And I wanted to also connect how churches are getting, their churches are jumping on board the green tsunami of globalism, and that's frightening to me. So as a Christian, as a minister, as a radio personality, as someone who has covered so many historical issues, I really wanted to take a coalescence, a culmination, if you will, of all the knowledge I have about my end of the environment, working in the system, and working with these hucksters, knowing it's a fraud, and then really taking a Christian perspective on it and saying, okay, so here we go. I'm looking at, I take people back to the decades of the origins of environmentalism, but I also provide facts about its development over the years and its plans for the future. So, I just wanted to make a book. It's interesting because my publisher asked me this question. It was really funny. She said, well, academics are going to attack your book. And I said, well, this book is deliberately not academic. It really just represents the personal journey that I know all too well from experience and interactions with thousands of people, Josh. So, I wanted to just really give people this easy to understand, very simple way to understand how this, because this is a very complex subject to tie together, and academics will attack the book and probably dismiss it as polemic, but they're right, because it absolutely is a book that really looks at the arch nemesis of Christianity. And so, yeah, that's really at the heart of it.
Yeah, and that's what I appreciate, about the book too. Like I mentioned before, you don't, for the audience, you don't have to have any kind of background in this stuff or even really know anything about it to appreciate and understand what's in this book. Because I went into this book totally blind. I didn't even know there was another side to, the green agenda. No clue. And in reading through your book, I mean, now I look back and like, how did I miss it? So for the audience, pick up this book because it's really important. And I'm also really glad that you mentioned how it is being accepted in the church. 'Cause the Bible tells us we're not supposed to walk in the ways of the world, and this is definitely a worldly affair. So we're not supposed to be walking in the ways of the world, but so much of the church and the rest of the world thinks that this is a good thing, and they want to. For at least the church, I believe that most of their intentions are good, but that doesn't mean the actual thing that they're doing or promoting is good. So I'm glad that you brought that up too, because there are a lot of pagan things and New Age garbage that's entering into the church nowadays. That's something that I do what I can to speak out against too. I remember a while ago I saw this presentation by Kent Hovind. This was years and years ago, but he just barely touched on the topic of overpopulation, and he had this graphic that said, that everybody in the world, if we figure out that everybody takes about a square foot of space, everybody can stand shoulder to shoulder, and they would only fill Jackson, Florida. That's it. And then he had this graphic that said, if it's overpopulated where you live, move. And I thought, but that was the first time that I ever really thought about this issue of overpopulation, and that maybe it's trumped up and exaggerated and it's not real. So, and that's something that's talked about a lot today, is overpopulation. So I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on overpopulation and the environment?
Well, the two correlate very, very well. I mean, Dr. Henry Kissinger wrote, depopulation should be the highest priority of U.S. foreign policy toward the third world. So, I remember this guy and his foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, helped fund the German eugenics program, and they even funded a program with Joseph Mengele worked in before he went to Auschwitz. So, you got this stench of Hitler's mass murderous frenzy still heavy in the air. And then you've got Sir Julian Huxley. People know that name Huxley. Obviously, this particular Huxley, who, yes, was related to the other very devious Aldous Huxley, the head of the Eugenics Society, he made a transition into pushing depopulation through UNESCO, who he became the head of in 1946 after, again, Hitler's genocide had given eugenics a bad name. Well, Huxley was a fan of Thomas Malthus. And so Thomas Malthus, he said that people would eventually outlive people would outgrow the population. Now, good old Obama's hand-picked science czar wrote a book with a very nefarious fellow named Paul Ehrlich, I want people to actually go and look this up. So Ehrlich is Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich, he's like a conjoined Marxist twin with John Holdren. Again, this is Obama's hand-picked science czar. They are both writing about depopulation, forced sterilizations. In fact, in one section in his book, Population Bomb, now again, they co-wrote Ecoscience. So in his book, Population Bomb, he said, we should put forced sterilants in the water for forced sterilization. I mean, that is stunning alone. You've got Slick Billy Gates and, of course, his pal Ted Turner saying, hey, we've just got far too many people using far too much stuff, and we need a nice little manageable population, about 500 million people. Well, Josh, that's a far cry from 7 billion people. I mean, Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, said the best thing a family could do to its newborn infant is to kill it.
Ugh.
So these are the kind of devilish people at the helm of these organizations. You've got British Royal Consort Prince Philip working with Huxley and working with, of course, the World Wildlife Fund, which sounds really good. It's the Wildlife Fund, but don't be fooled. This is Agenda 21 on steroids. You've got Prince Philip saying, hey, if I ever came back as a deadly virus, I'd like to wipe out the Earth's population. Well, I say we start with him, Ted Turner, Bill Gates. So, it's very frightening. These people are all extremely vehemently fans of getting rid of massive parts of the population.
Yeah, it's scary that these are the people that are in control and that make decisions for us on, how we're going to live in a lot of different aspects of life. And of course, we can't have a discussion like this without bringing up Al Gore, and he's somebody that you wrote a lot about in your book. How does Al Gore and the whole CO2 emission issue fit into all this?
Well, Al Gore is probably, when it comes to hot air, that is the biggest windbag going. And what's really funny is, he said, and this is the funny part is, here's this Tennessee, this Tennessee senator, and he actually signed the dust jacket cover to the book that I just alluded to, The Population Bomb, a good old senator there, Al Gore at the time. And that is amazing that he was friends with these guys.
Wow.
So Al Gore, and just a very hypocritical windbag. This company out of Nashville actually was surprised because he was saying, oh my gosh, the sea levels are all rising by 40 feet next week. And then all of a sudden he buys a oceanfront property in this San Francisco Bay Area. This guy doesn't believe any of that.
Wow.
He had the biggest footprint of all time of anybody on planet Earth. And so when this company went in to investigate his electricity bill, they said, wait a minute, you're 75 times the average household. How is that? So, I mean, this guy is just a complete hypocrite. He's a windbag. Every week he's saying the science is settled. The IPCC, which is United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which I call them, Josh, the International Panel of Climate Crooks, because these guys are a body that was set up under the UN, and of course, they want to really promulgate this idea that man, those CO2 emitting demons, those useless plebs, those useless eating, beer guzzling plebs are really giving the great goddess Gaia a fever. And we wouldn't want to do that. So Al Gore is always spewing out this mantra, the science is settled. This IPCC, he says, is the gold standard of climate science. Obama actually echoes that as well. It's just so frightening how these guys have taken the very air we breathe and hijacked this for a political purpose.
Yeah, no kidding. This is something that because I'm really into science, and most of my I wouldn't call it expertise, but most of my interests or whatever are in quantum physics, but it seems like no matter what area of science, it's always the same paradigm of the scientist's attitude of like, we know better than you, and it's okay that we can't communicate it to you in a way that you're going to understand, so you just have to trust us. It's you find that in every area of science, and it's ridiculous. I personally hate it. I hate that attitude, and that that's why something that I'm passionate about is showing people that no, you're not an idiot. You don't have to be a genius to understand this stuff. They just speak a different language, and they don't know how to speak they don't know how to speak English. But there are a lot of people who say that we need to save the environment. They claim that they, like you said, like Al Gore, they claim that they have a lot of science to back up their claims, and especially like with the CO2 stuff and all these other areas. So what is your response to these so-called scientific claims, and is there real science to support the claims in your book?
Yeah, there is some scientific information in there. I mean, we got to remember that those pushing this global warming fraud, what they've done, though, and this is the piece that people have to remember, they've targeted human CO2 emissions as its ostensible cause because CO2 or carbon dioxide, it really is the God-given natural and necessary byproduct of the industrial activity that sustains human life. Now, here's the bottom line. If we don't have plants, plants die, humans die. So this is the thing. I mean, this sort of, in the past 2 decades, this progressively built hysteria about global warming, it's now erupted into this full-blown campaign offensive. And so according to climatological and geological experts, shifts in CO2, now think about this, shifts in CO2 have no relationship to global warming. I'm going to repeat that. CO2 and shifts in it has nothing to do with the Earth's temperature. So the only place, Josh, in the world where CO2 increases before temperature is in the IPCC United Nations computer models. And every prediction they've ever made is wrong. And so, Obama and Gore, they like to refer to carbon dioxide as global warming pollution. That's the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard. The US EPA officially took it to court, and they declared that stuff you breathe, that deadly pollutant CO2, they actually regulated it by the federal government. So it's now classified as a dangerous pollutant. And again, CO2 is the vital atmospheric trace gas that's essential to plant food life. It's essential to life. It is essential for life. There'd be no plants, no oxygen, without which there'd be no animals, and that includes human beings. So Gore would like you to believe, though, that the very thing you exhale, Josh, is problematic, and because you breathe, you're a problem.
Wow, yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, and the whole global warming thing. You would think that by now, because there were predictions made 10, 20 years ago that we would be in a whole mess of trouble by now that we're not in. You would think more people would be at least open to looking into that, but they're really not. And there's another term that you talk about in your book too. What can you tell us about the greenhouse effect?
Well, again, this is what I said, is the greenhouse effect is based on this idea that the temperature, and this is, again, in every record on the planet from any time period in the Earth's history, temperature increases before CO2 does. So this is completely contradictory to the IPCC's greenhouse gas emissions. They say that, everything culminates and it's all based on the fact that the Earth is heating up because of CO2. And again, to reiterate, they have nothing to do with each other. Nothing to do. In fact, this is really interesting, in the medieval warming period, it was actually warmer now than it is today. And so what happened, this is really interesting, your listeners might be very interested to know this. So there was two fellas that went to this East Anglia where all these emails were leaked, because Michael Mann created what's known as, it's a very famous term in the climatological arenas, and it's called the Mann's hockey stick. So he created a computer model that produced this protruding blade of a hockey stick. Now, what happened was these two guys go to get his data, and what they found, and this is so stunning, that every single thing that they put into, they fed in. So they would just feed any information into this climate model. No matter what they put in it, it produced that hockey stick. So, they doctored these, they cooked the books, they doctored this model to show that there is a steady increase. But here's the bottom line. We've been in a cooling trend for 17 years. Now, this is funny. Al Gore actually said to a group of students in Toronto, Canada, he said, this one student said to him, well, actually, there's a lot of dissenting scientists that are saying that it actually hasn't been warming in the last 17 years. In fact, it's been cooling. We're in a cooling trend. And Al Gore said to him, well, the reason that we have global cooling is because of global warming. So it's just
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Well, again, and so when Steve McIntyre and Ross McKintrick, when they tried to replicate that construction, you got to keep in mind they were stonewalled in, every turn. They couldn't, they were just blocked of getting this graphene. And Michael Mann said, well, why do you want it? They said, because you're basing huge policy on this one little computer model. So, and of course, this computer model became the poster child for global warming. And it's I call it the, schools, children scaring Gore mishap, because it really, it continues to be sort of it's hailed sort of as the holy grail of global warming advocates, as the gospel. So, and, of course, the United Nations still carry it, this hockey stick to compel global policy, and Al Gore carries it all the way to the bank. So we're really being duped by a lot of different organizations and folks here, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, no kidding. And especially, you go into your book too about Pope Francis and his position on the Green Initiative. How does that? Because he obviously has a lot of pull with the population of the world. So how does that fit into the plans of the new world order?
Well, it's a good question. Pope Francis, and I actually dedicate a whole chapter to this patron saint to the environment and his green theology. Now you have to remember, like these guys historically, I mean, in 1990, John Paul II, he said Catholics had a special religious obligation to protect God's creation from damage. So, of course, they talked about burning of fossil fuels, unrestricted deforestation. And so, he was actually dubbed the Green Pope for a while because he was always talking about, and here's a buzzword, ecological devastations. I mean, come on, give me a break. So following the resignation of Pope Benedict on February 28, 2013, Tom Horn covers this extensively. And if people haven't read his book, Petrus Romanus, they need to. So a papal conclave then elects George Marian Bergoglio. His name is not Pope Francis. He just kind of reportedly took his papal title after Saint Francis of Assisi of Italy. He was the founder of the Franciscan Order of the Friars Minor. And like Hitler, Saint Francis was a devout admirer, I would say a worshiper of nature. So that's where Pope Francis took his name. Pope Francis is also, ironically, the first Jesuit, that's a first in history for a pope to be a Jesuit. And the Jesuits were formed by Ignatius Loyola to act as the strict upholders of religious law, which really, if you think about it, that kind of puts Pope Francis' ideas in conflict with Catholic teaching. So how he fits into this is I don't know if your listeners know this, but they can Google this. It was quite frightening. On June 18th of this year, the Pope puts his moral authority behind this 192-page climate encyclical. What that is basically, hey, listen up, 1.2 billion Catholics on the earth. You better do it and like it. What are you doing? You're going to bow down to Mother Gaia. You're going to start really looking at the seriousness of this, global warming. And he actually says right in his speech, it's in Italian, and then they later, had it. They translate it into English, and he says, it's confirmed man is causing global warming. So I thought, well, when did the Pope become a climatologist? But then he goes on to actually say this. And it was so interesting because Gina McCarthy, the top bureaucrat of the Environmental Protection Agency, she went to the Vatican. She said to the Pope, hey, you and President Barack Obama are really, really aligned on this whole climate change thing. It's not an environmental issue, but it's really a chance to really amalgamate people, amalgamate opportunities. So what they did is they had him write this papal encyclical, and he issues a stern warning that we have to take this the most serious of anything out there. And what he did is he actually recommended in that to have a global climate authority, a one world global authority. Interesting. So that's how they're going to get it.
Wow, yeah, that's mind blowing. And you go into your book about how this all ties back to Gaia worship, and it's something that you briefly mentioned here. Can you go further into that? Like, what exactly does that mean, and what are their goals towards this Gaia worship thing?
Well, so Gaia and Gaia worship is really at the very heart of today's green movement, Josh. So if you look at it's just an absolute religious movement. This whole environmentalism has become a religion to these people. If people look up IPCC's chair, the chair of the IPCC, get this, was a railway engineer, no science background. And this guy came out in February when he resigned from the IPCC, and he said, this is not just my job. This is my religion. It's my dharma. So he's Vedic Hindu. And what happened was they were stunned when he said that right to the New York Times. He said, this is my religion. Environmentalism is my religion. So it's become a religion, but it's based on, as Al Gore says in his book, Earth and the Balance, Mother Gaia, the great goddess Gaia, is a living, breathing, sentient being, and we must protect her at all costs. So it's putting human life under the earth. It's the ultimate form of earth worship is what it is. It's the green movement is really, Josh, the ultimate expression of worshiping the creation rather than the creator.
Wow. Yeah, and before I had a chance to read your book, I hadn't looked at it that way, but you make such compelling arguments in your book. For the audience, once you read this book, you're going to look back and think, how did I not see this before? Because that's been my experience. Well, it is the time in the show for viewer questions. So for the audience, if you want the chance to send in questions to future guests, you can go to the Sharpening Report Facebook group and send a request to join, and I'll add you as long as you're not an obvious spammer or something like that, or a fake account. I'll be happy to add you, and every time that we do one of these episodes, beforehand I put up a post and pin the post in the group about who the guest is, what the show's about, and then we give you the opportunity to send in questions if you like. So it's that part of the show. Let's see. We'll start here, and I only use first names, so I don't want to embarrass anybody. But all right. So Ray writes in. I love to listen to her show once in a while. I remember she used to be on Hagman and Hagman on weekends. I wonder if you could ask her if she took the right decision to leave them. I used to like to listen to her on weekends. I kind of lost track a bit of her since she left. And okay, good question. I didn't really know if there was even a story behind that or what that all was about. So I'll just leave that up to you, Sheila, and you just go for it.
Well, thank you, Ray, for that question. So yeah, I had quite a long history with Hagman's, and I was just absolutely so thrilled to be a weekend correspondent. I was a weekend host of Hagman and Hagman Report, and we used to do a lot of shows. I would fill in for them, sometimes even the weekdays, and we just had a really good camaraderie. We're still very good friends, and I parted company with them only because I didn't feel one night a week was really conducive to what I wanted to do, especially, and plus it was a Saturday, and I really, really felt with my ministry being a lot in, of course, the fivefold apostolic ministry of healing, deliverance, preaching the gospel. It just didn't seem to be enough time to cover all the guests that I wanted to cover. So I just really made a decision to go on my own, and it was, the Hagmans are just I just adore them. They're just great men.
I couldn't agree more. I love those guys to death. I was actually just on their show at the time of this recording. I was on their show last night, and every time I go on there, it's always a blast. But yeah, that's good. It's good to hear that there's no like bad blood or anything. Not that I thought that there was. I don't think anyone really thought that, or maybe they did. I don't know. This is the first time hearing about this anyway. So, but it's good to have that cleared up. Good deal. All right. So Lisa asks, how does the Global Marshall Plan differ from Agenda 21/Agenda 2030?
There really is no difference. This is all just part and parcel of the same ugly bird of this green gospel, really. I mean, in reality, it's a tsunami of globalism. It operates not even clandestinely anymore. It's really out in the open. Agenda 21 is part of it. It's a massive global agenda, and it's coming soon, if it's not already, to a local community near you. It calls for dramatically increasing urbanization. It forces people, out of rural areas and into these, look at these new smart cities they're building. Now Obama's talking about, there's other smart cities and these super cities now that have the United Nations very draconian police force. So basically, it's increasing urbanization, forcing these people out of rural areas into these densely populated, massive mega cities, complete with these stack and pack micro apartments controlled by Who else? The technocrats with the ability to control every area of everybody's life. Look at the smart grid, smartphones, smart meters, smart technology, smart cars, now smart cities. I mean, that is, when completed, I'd call that hell on earth. Well, Aldous Huxley actually had a name for it. He said, we'll make them love their servitude. So it's really kind of this death by a thousand cuts, throwing the kitchen sink at us, acclimating us, desensitizing us. It's just, it's a very, very methodical and malevolent plan. And so Lisa's question is a great one, but it's all interwoven, and transhumanism is a part of this as well. So it's all this very eclectic mishmash of hellish horror is what it is.
Yeah, we're definitely headed towards dark times, and we're actually in dark times now. But yeah, that is just insane. Lisa also asks, does the Global Marshall Plan and the Global Green Marshall Plan play a role in your green gospel argument?
Absolutely, no question. Yeah, I mean, that would be a long-winded question to answer, but absolutely, it's absolutely interwoven into all of this. It's absolutely no question about it. And those are really great questions, so your listeners are very keen.
Yeah, absolutely. They're great people. We always have really, really good discussions in the Sharpening Report group, and I just love them to death, and I learn a lot from them too. So I always like being in a position where I can learn things too. But yeah, so thank you. I appreciate you saying that. James writes in, please ask Sheila if she feels that we will make it to 2016 without a major disruptive event per the general world scenario.
Well, they're throwing a lot at us. We're getting kind of pummeled 6 ways to Sunday. There's a lot happening, and I do believe that between now and probably the end of next year, there's going to be some very significant things play out. I believe we are going into a major economic meltdown. I do believe the economy is going to collapse this coming year, and I do believe there's going to be an implementation of martial law on the heels of that. The gun grabbing, Obama's not going to rest until he basically appeals the Second Amendment. That's frightening. You've got Dianne Not-So-Feinstein and her pal Hitlery that are just gun-grabbing cronies. And it's so stunning when you think of the gradual fall of the Republic through these very devilish people. And Obama, I am going to just call him what he is. He is a jihadist in the slaughterhouse, and that bathhouse Barry is just an evil puppet, is what he is.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. Absolutely. Jen writes in, Josh, ask her for me, when was the veil lifted from her eyes, and how bad was the attack, either from man or from demons, when she turned toward Christ and began attacking them? Thank you, and God bless.
Well, I don't know if there was an actual time, because I've been a Christian since I was 17. So I'm always going to have, Jesus himself said that we will be persecuted if we're his followers. So it's not really something that I don't anticipate. You and I know this very well because we've talked about this on my show. We always get hacked. We always get attacked, and plus we're being tracked. So tapped and attract. There you go. Well, I mean, the NSA is spying on us all the time, but it's not just that. So it's not all these, these psyops and COINTELPRO and these, shills out there, but it's also legitimate so-called Christian brothers and sisters. I get emails that would just make your skin crawl. I mean, I love you guys too much to repeat some of the stuff I get called, but we're always going to get attacked. We're not fighting flesh and blood, though. We are fighting principalities, powers, rulers of the air. So we're fighting a whole different battle here. It's a spiritual battle. And think of how hard they work to try to conceal the truth. And that must just make people think, why do they fight so hard? And yet, sadly, a lot of people are still walking around in this kind of dystopic trance, singing Kumbaya to the pipe Piper while Rome burns around us. And that's the part that really breaks my heart. So, I keep my eyes focused on that. And I keep my eyes focused on the countless people that need Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. And that is really the bottom line here. All other roads are dead ends. Jesus Christ really is our only hope in all of this hellish plan unfolding, Josh. The Bible talks about it, prophecies on fire in the world, and that really is our only hope. So I hope if there's people listen to your show and they do not know Jesus Christ as their Savior, well, there couldn't be a better time to get salvation through Jesus Christ.
Amen. I could not agree with you more. And I'm really glad that you brought up the issue that we researchers and YouTubers and authors, whatever, that we have to deal with from other people claiming that they're Christian. We have to deal with a lot of insults and things. And something that I wanted to tell you is you actually inspired me. The last time that we talked, we had a pretty, actually this is how we met. We had a conversation starting online about how we have to deal with a lot of these people that call themselves Christian, but they have no idea, or they have no problem cussing us out, online, and usually on YouTube. I don't get it as much on Facebook. It's usually YouTube, but yeah, and we had a really good conversation about that, and you told me how you leave your comments up, and you give people the opportunity to talk. There is something that really resonated with me with that, and I decided to go ahead and allow comments back on my videos, because for a long time, for about a year, I had all comments turned off because I just couldn't deal with it. I got sick of it. I got sick of being cussed out all the time, and then I was worried, well, if my kids want to watch my videos, I don't want them to have to read this stuff. But there are more important things to consider, and not all comments are like that. It's just a few. So why would I want to let a few bullies, a handful of bullies, ruin it for everybody else? So I just wanted to let you know that you actually did really get through to me on that, and I turned the comments back on my videos. Most of them, the popular ones, because I have like 200 or 300, so that's going to take a long time to go into each one and turn the comments back on, but slowly but surely. But all the new ones and all the more popular ones, the comments are back on. So I do want to thank you for that. So you inspired me there.
Well, yeah, we really get hammered sometimes. And again, we get relegated to the depths of the damned. And I don't always agree with the people that come on my show, the guests. I don't always agree with them. And I think I've said this to you. I would have 2 guests on if I really had people on just that notably only share the same thing in common. I mean, we're always going to fight on the, it's like these devilish things on the Hebraic roots now and the flat earth and the pre-trib versus post-trib. I mean, it causes absolute drag them down, knockout fights between so-called Christians. And I just shudder when I read that stuff. But the other thing is, I'm a big proponent of the First Amendment. So, we have the right to free speech. I really don't, unless it's absolutely just, if it does have actual, foul language in it, then there's times where I'll remove that off Facebook because I have friends, kids and stuff on there. But for the most part, I really try to just let it go. Let people are going to say what they want. It's part of the, it's kind of par for the course, I guess, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big believer in free thought in the church, and because I have guests on. Most of the guests that I have on, there's some aspect. I don't think that there really are any 2 Christians in the world that can agree on every little bit of theology, because there's so much, and there's so much that's unknown. I mean, I think you take any 2 Christians and get them talking long enough, they're going to find something they don't agree on. That doesn't give us an excuse to hate each other or any of that stuff. I actually, one thing I'm really thankful about God working on my heart is I used to be really prideful and really like, I used to be like, if you don't believe in the pre-trib rapture, then don't even talk to me. That, like, that's a lie out of the pit of hell. I used to be like that guy. That guy. And like, I look back on it and it's just think, man, I wasted so much energy just being ridiculous. Like, what a ridiculous thing. But now I appreciate other people's differences because a lot of times I can learn from them. Either, and it doesn't always mean that I change my mind. Sometimes it solidifies what I already believe in, or sometimes somebody will bring up an aspect that I hadn't thought about before, and that'll get me to re-examine my previous beliefs. So it's a good thing when we disagree. Now, if it's something that's like really heretical or like totally blasphemous, then we don't have to deal with that. But when it's just something like you mentioned, like the timing of the rapture or any non-salvation issue like that, instead of wasting time fighting about it, let's talk about it and learn from one another. We might just learn something. But yeah, so I totally agree with you there. You definitely inspired me, and that's awesome. I know you're limited on time, so I just have two questions left, and the first one is, if people want to find more about you or your book, where can they go?
Well, I appreciate asking, because I want to throw this in at the very end here, because Josh, this thing is, I think, the most timely issue. Tom Horn agrees. Steve Quayle and Tom Horn wrote endorsements, as well as Michael Lake and many others. The renowned climatologist Dr. Tim Ball says Sheila's book effectively demolishes most of what you think you know on this. So, you got to remember, like a cancer, this green theology is spreading through thousands of churches. And that's the frightening part, because people have no idea of what's being advanced in, cloaked under the very seemingly benevolent going green mantra of the day. And this is a diabolical opposition to Christianity. It's pagan, pantheistic, occult, Luciferian, great goddess worship. It's, this whole thing is based on, I guess you could say the Gaia worship is at the very heart of this whole thing. And that is deeply entrenched in the very ancient pantheistic religions that dominated the Egyptian, Babylonian, Grecian, and Roman empires. We saw that with Nimrod, the Ammonites, so it makes no allowance for one true God who created all things. And again, it's diametrically opposed to Christianity. So if you are a Christian, and Al Gore helped good old CFR member Rick Warren distribute going green. So churches became green. And there was over 98,000 churches in the United States. So that's over 40 million churchgoers in the U.S. And I don't know how many evangelicals jumped on board of what's called, and your listeners can look this up. This is the most frightening part, is the Evangelical Climate Initiative. What business does evangelical and climate initiative even have in the same sentence? I don't know, but any of these churches who are going green, you have to understand that, this evil Marxist cabal and their minions, they're not going to rest until they achieve total global control. And that's what's happening with this climate mantra, this one world global authority. And so anyway, I just wanted to say that, Josh, and people can get the book. It's so important. I hope they do get it at greengospel.ca. That's my book website, and there's a very easy order now button there. Also, the ebook's available if people prefer that format. I actually quite like a physical book that I can highlight and mark up and, take on a plane, but, to each their own. So I just really want to encourage people, please do become educated on it.
Absolutely, and it's so important in our day and age. And you might have just done this, and if so, just let me know, and we'll conclude the show. But you might have already answered this last question. But if you had to wrap up all of what we talked about into a final thought, what would you want the audience to take away from this interview?
Well, there's so much, but I guess just the premise that all this is really, it's got nothing to do with the climate. The issue isn't the issue. It's not about saving the planet. these pantheistic pagan beliefs, they dominate the environmental policies of the U.S., the UN, the Vatican, and now the world. And it's in the churches. And if churches and Christians knew, the global green agenda, the Sustainable Development Mantra, Agenda 21, the Earth Charter, and all this man-made global warming hysteria, it's all part and parcel of the Gaian's mission to save Mother Earth from her human infestation. That's what it is. So that's what I'd like them to take away is this is something we need to be avoiding at all costs. We need to speak out. And, they want to implement a carbon tax. That's a fine for breathing. Think about that. So this is very devilish. And I really want to wake people up to what's going on here. Again, they've taken the ultimate handle, hijacking the very air we breathe to implement this climate change authority. And that is very frightening. And that's what I hope that people take away from the show.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I know you're limited on time, and I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Sheila, and sharing this with us. It is an absolutely fantastic book, definitely important. I think it's one of those books every Christian should own, and like you said, become educated on. We'll definitely have to have you back on the show again sometime.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. I've really got a lot of feedback on the show that you and I did. Cause for concern. The CERN show is really good, and it's always a pleasure to come on your program as well. Josh, thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Yeah, first of many, I'm sure. All right, hang on the line. I'm going to conclude us here. So for the audience, that again was Sheila Zilinsky, author of Green Gospel, The New World Religion. I highly, highly, highly suggest it. It is a controversial topic, but it's an important one. It's extremely, the book is extremely well written. It's written in a way that's easy to understand, and I guarantee, even if you know nothing about this, like me before I got a copy of this book, you're gonna look back and wonder how you missed it. So be sure to get the book. The website again is greengospel.ca. There will be a link in the description, in the show description. So check that out. Also, if you would like to find more episodes of The Sharpening, you can do so at ministudyministry.com and my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Josh Peck Disclosure. I'm also doing daily videos now, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already to my YouTube channel. Also, if you care to help support Mini Study Ministry, you can do so at ministudyministry.com. Your donations go to the everyday running of Mini Study Ministry and help bring you more episodes of The Sharpening Report, as well as more books and other materials. And in fact, right now, we have a deal. For a donation of any amount for the rest of October, I will send you 5 free PDFs of my books. So make sure you put your email address when you donate. So you can check out the Mini Study Ministry donate page for more information on that. Also, if you make a purchase at Neshama Essentials, that is my wife's company, all the best, top quality, and most inexpensive products in the health and beauty, cosmetics, that genre. Make any purchase there, and it is the same deal. 5 free PDFs of my books. Again, this will continue throughout October, so act now. And as I do in every episode, I'm going to say when it comes to donations, only donate if you feel God leading you to do so. If you're not sure, or if you don't feel led, you can just pray for us. We can always use more prayer anyway. We're not 501c3, not that we're against it, we're just not. So your donations are not tax deductible. And I'm never going to be the kind of person that's going to promise you extra blessings from God or a miraculous tenfold return on your money or anything like that. We're not in the business of making promises for God. But what I can promise is that your help, be it prayer or financial, is greatly appreciated, keeps us going, and is the only reason we're able to continue doing what we do. All right, so all that being said, we are all out of time, and I want to thank you so much for tuning into the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck, and as always, take care, and God bless.